I've been world building in Minecraft for a year now, and over this last year, we've made some nice progress on the world. We started the fairy core city of Mosswood, practiced building organics and terraforming, and also started the Dwarven city of Ashgrund. Going forward, I want to expand this world with even more villages, cities, and maybe even some castles. So if you like world building, leave a like and subscribe if you're new. So with the year in the books, I think it's time we did a proper world tour for this world. And I wanted to start off where we all began, the starter base in the fairy core area. This is the city of Mosswood. Most of my viewers probably don't really know this area. I kind of blew up in the Dwarven kingdom, but this is where we kind of started our humble series here. But our starter base is built out of a little acorn here. So this whole area in general, it's called the Sylvan Frontier or the Sylvan Wilds. It's kind of like a fairy forest area. So they're going to be using a lot of like organic objects to kind of build into. And then they also reuse like recycled litter and whatnot that's left behind by other races. But this is kind of an acorn. You can see the little twig right here, and then it's like the top part right there, and then the actual shell. But going inside, we actually did have a interior, and this is where I spent the first like 400, probably like 300, 400 days of this Minecraft world. I used this as my starter base. We had our first diamond armor here. It's only the diamond helmet because I came back and grabbed the diamond armor. But it's very, very small, very cozy little build here. And in our second episode, we built the fairy mines. So this is kind of what we were talking about using recycled objects. This whole build style in general is very, very fairy core, and it's a very interesting style. So this whole series is kind of a love child. It's a world building series. So we're going to build a lot of cities and a lot of like towns and villages. And we want to kind of interconnect all of the builds of this world. And so one of the main goals for the series is to explore a variety of different build styles. You know, styles that I don't normally build in. So this build style was like super fun to build. It's, you know, it really expands your creativity. And so this is supposed to be kind of a pot that's holding a fishing rod. As you can tell, it's kind of based off of the, you know, Minecraft fishing rod. We've got the reel here, and then that's the actual shaft of the fishing rod, and then there's the wheel there that kind of brings up this bob, which the bob is red. And it's kind of one way that they're repurposing a fishing pole to kind of lift materials up and down from the mine. And then the mining shack is just a rock that's repurposed and hollowed out into this little mining shack. And then we also have a little water tower that is taking this little teacup here. And so one thing I like to do is I like to connect my build. So this is a water tower, but it's in the shape of a teacup right there. So the fairies have found a teacup and then repurpose it as a water tower. And then here we have our nether portal, which is our nether teapottle. But this would be a teapot that maybe the fairies found in the wild. Somebody passed away and they found this little teapot and they repurposed it to a little teapot home. I really enjoyed building this. It's got a nice cute pink color, and then it blends in perfectly with the white. And then there's also another teacup here, which is kind of like a hot tub for the fairies to kind of bathe in. And also really wanted to do interiors for most of my builds. It's one of the things that in the YouTube series, they don't do interiors at all. So I tried to incorporate some interiors. Obviously not everything is going to have an interior, but this is my attempt to kind of add just a little bit of interiors for anybody that wants to, you know, have a world download. But I've got my first pickaxe here and my very first diamond in my little mining hut here. Over here we have the boot barn. So one of the ways that the fairies build in this area is they take items from lost travelers or wandering travelers, travelers that, you know, may have passed away in the forests. They would repurpose their items. So this boot would probably come from like a ranger. It's a very whimsical looking boot with that little curve right there. But like this style is super creative. And for these builds as well, I'm kind of building in a perspective that we are all very tiny right now. So this is kind of the fairy forest area. So we're all probably very, very tiny. These trees aren't actually supposed to be, you know, this size tree. These trees would be a lot larger. Just imagine you're a tiny person and that this isn't just some massive boot. This is a boot you'd find off of a human, not like a giant. But we did also do a little bit of an interior here as well. So you've got like a little fireplace here, and then you'll be able to come up here and take a rest up here for a little bedroom here and a little sleeping spot. And then we've got a little rainbow mosaic here. And then at the top of the boot, you've got this little terrace where you can overlook the rest of the city of Mosswood. One thing that I have an issue with this area is that I feel like it lacks a little bit of cohesion. I was very new to kind of world building and building like cities in Minecraft. So this whole area, I feel like could do a lot better with connecting the builds and whatnot. So if I were to do another fairy city, I'd probably be able to kind of make it a little more cohesive. Over here, we have a mushroom infested tree stump, and this is kind of a centerpiece of the whole city. This is where the council of the fairies meet. We got an interior here where the main fairy leaders would meet at this round table. I imagine that fairies are very clanastic, so they've got, you know, clans of fairies. So this is one of my first organics that I've ever done. It's supposed to be a tree stump, and I'm not sure if I did too good of a job, but you can see we've got little tree rings as well. So we like to keep the immersion. We like to keep all the builds a little realistic. It doesn't have to be too realistic because it's, you know, very heavily fantasy. But we've got these little bay windows that are coming out of these shelf mushrooms. But it's a super, super cozy build. And I like to connect this build as well with this area. So we've got a trunk right here, but then we've got a hollowed log right here. So this hollowed log would probably be coming from this tree at one point when it fell. And then they repurposed this tree log into a moss farm. This is my moss farm in here, but I think I called it a tavern. I think it's called the Sleepy Hollow Tavern. Let's see, yeah, the Sleepy Hollow. So this is our tavern for a bunch of fairies, and it also serves as our moss farm. Looking at the outside though, we've got another shelf mushroom bay window there, and then we've got more shelf mushrooms. I think these are supposed to be like chicken of the wood type of mushrooms that I had. But I like to add a lot of colorful parts to this fairy core style build. And then we've got little tiny little flowers that actually they kind of look like the new flowers that are coming out in the new update whenever they do that. But you get greeted by this cute little mushroom right in the middle, and then you come through, and then bam, we've got a little fairy tavern here. So we did do a little bit of an interior in here as well. So we've got little tables for all the fairies to drink. They're probably drinking some like honey mead or something like that. Got a little bar area here to get your drinks. And then here is our moss farm. Our moss farm is not the most efficient moss farm, I must say, but it does like lose a lot of moss occasionally in certain spots. It doesn't trap all the moss correctly, but it's, you know, it's a beginner moss farm and it gets us through. And then up here, we've got little rooms for the guests to sleep in. And then over here, we have a honeybee hobbit hole. This was inspired by another video that I saw. I will leave a link in the description for that video, but she made a hobbit hole that kind of was like honeybees. So I wanted to have a honey farm, so I made a honeybee hobbit hole. For this build, I wanted to do something asymmetric. So I feel like building like symmetrical looks nice sometimes, but when you build like asymmetric, it adds a lot of interest. So I really wanted to kind of expand upon that, and I think it did a pretty good job. So we've got a lot of honeycomb in there, and then we do add some yellow wool just to save because we didn't have enough honeycomb. But going inside, we did do another interior as well, and it's looking pretty cute in here too. So we've got those little hobbit hole style like doorways, pathways. So this is like a little dining area, and then a little kitchen. And then we've got our actual honey farm here where we've got some bees hard at work. Not the largest farm, but it is expandable if I want to kind of break this down and kind of expand it. But for the meantime, I think like I had a lot of honey, so I really don't need that much. And then going up, we've got more living space that is not decorated, but you know, it's fine. I did add like a spot where I can kind of work the actual dispensers that add shears to them, which is a little cool little touch. And over here we have the Loreberry Library. It's play on play on words there. A lot of kids back in the day would say library instead of library. So we've got a little library in there. And I think for this build, I kind of started having like creative block. So this is one of those builds where I'm kind of saying it doesn't really match the whole area. Like it stands out kind of like a sore thumb. It doesn't necessarily match with this whole area, which is one thing I would love to change if I come back to this area, or maybe I would just start a brand new fairy city so I can kind of get the cohesion that I want. But inside we've got a little library where the fairies can come read. And so here I used to do a lot of lore. So we've got a lore book here. Got 10 pages of lore in there for anyone to come read if they want to, you know, download this world. The one reason why I stopped doing lore was just because it felt like it was becoming more of like a history lesson or something like that. And sometimes I would kind of change the lore as I'm building new stuff. So it kind of felt weird to kind of like immortalize it in the book. I don't know, like I know a lot of people love the lore book, so I've been trying to bring little bits of lore back, which I will continue to do. It's just maybe I don't want to finalize it within the book, the lore book itself. Over here we have a bottled greenhouse, which is a greenhouse in a bottle. And one of the ways I wanted to connect this to my world is I've got this little logo here. It's like says something, car, can, cad, something like that. I want to build a bottle factory in the future that kind of like shows that this bottle came from that factory, and then whenever someone came into this fairy forest, they littered, and then the fairies reused this bottle. Coming inside, we've got a little nice cozy greenhouse area. We did a lot of brown and green glass, I do believe. And this is where I store a lot of my flowers and my vegetation. Obviously this one has a bunch of random stuff in it, but we've got like drip leaf, and then we've got like some crop blocks somewhere. Nope, that's bone meal. But we got a bunch of flowers in here basically. This is kind of where I'm storing some flowers and some of the organic stuff. Next up is our fairy fishing village called Lotus Village, I believe I called it. A very, very creative name, I must say. I want to avoid the lily pads that I have around here, but well, we'll come through here. Okay, so this area is a very, very cute build. It's one of my, like, I'm honestly really proud of this build. It's a bunch of huts built out of flowers. So this is supposed to replicate a Minecraft village. So the builds are super tiny, and but the huts are built out of these little lotus flowers on these lily pads. So if we take a look from the sky, we made the lotus flowers a little different for each one, but it's super, super tiny, super cozy. We use a lot of like trapdoors and carpets to kind of help like accentuate the curves of the flower petals. And it looks honestly super nice. We've got a resident bee here that's been glitched from like the start. I don't know what's happened with its pathfinding, but it's definitely broken. And then over here, we did a lot of fishing as well. We tried to get a mending book, but obviously the mending book did not manifest here, unfortunately for us. So we ended up getting a villager, I do believe, for the mending. But for this village, we also had a little pathway using these little lotus lily pads, which is super cool. So they're over here smoking some fish on this little lily pad here. They're probably tiny, tiny fish for them because they're so small. So all of the little lotus flowers are a little different in shape and size. So this one, we've got all the petals kind of like looking like this. And then this one, the petals do look a little different here in terms of the big petals here with the shape. So I try to add some differentiation between all of them. Like this one, we've got the petals looking like this. This one's going down, this one's going up. And it adds a nice little touch to the whole area. So it's not like 100% uniform. Like all the builds aren't just one uniform thing. And then here we've got a little budding lotus flower here. So this was how the village would expand. Like they would kind of grow another lotus flower and then turn that one into a hut as well. But the main attraction is the big lotus flower hut in the middle. And this is supposed to be where the tribal leader for this whole area lives. I believe I called this fishing clan like the Skare fishing clan, like for fish, which is not the most creative name, but the interior, very cozy, very cute. Got a little skylight here as well to add some light in the area. We also made a cute little boat here, made out of like twigs. So it's a bunch of different colored wood blocks that are supposed to represent like little twigs. And then here is kind of a leaf block sail. So it's another twig here, and then for their sail, it's just a leaf. And this is supposed to be the stem. It doesn't really look the greatest, but I think when you use your imagination, it does kind of look like a little leaf. But you know, it's a cute way to add, you know, one form of transportation for the fairies here as well. I mean, obviously they're able to fly, but you know, sometimes, you know, maybe they're trying to go on a fishing trip and, you know, use a boat. One cool trick we did with this area is we use a lot of moss carpet and green carpet to create like algae in this area. So there's a lot of algae on this little river here, little patches of it kind of scattered throughout. And, you know, I think it does add a nice little touch. You can obviously add the algae to, you know, regular build as well. Like if you're building a medieval port, for example, you can have algae kind of like hiding in the corners of your port. And that's a good way to add a nice little touch of decoration. Our next stop is here in Timberfall. This is our very first human settlement, and the human settlement is based off of a silk punk, kind of like an Asian style. So we did a bunch of little Asian style roofing for this area. So this is the town of Timberfall, where the humans are kind of cutting down the fairy forest. And so here we've got a little mess hall where they're able to eat their grub. And then this is just a little tiny home that I try to replicate with the, you know, vanilla Minecraft villages. I wanted to keep some of the villages like very simple, very small, just kind of very similar to the vanilla style. So here we've got bunk beds for more lumberjacks to kind of sleep in. And then we've got a little, I think here originally was a Minecraft church. And so I wanted to make a little spot for worship. So we made a little shrine in here. So we've got some incense here using the brewing stands. Got a little thing holding probably the incense in there. And, you know, it's a very tiny, cute little build, I must say. Very, you know, small shrine-esque. And so with this build, I meant to add like a point of interest. So I'm building on a very large, I'm building on large biomes. So throughout the world, I want to add small little points of interest like this. So this is a little small town of interest where, you know, they're cutting logs, and it kind of helps explain the economy of this whole world as well. Here we've got a little water wheel kind of working in this little Timberfall town here. We've got more Asian style roofing. We've got the flying eaves on the roofs. So the flying eaves are these little pointy parts on the corners of the roofing. So very Chinese, very Japanese-esque. And then this is our little water wheel, which we did add some white stained glass to help create a little splash effect. And so this is my forever world, so I want to keep building upon it. So, you know, 10 years down the line, I want this world to be like infested with all these different city builds and whatnot. Here we had a blacksmith that is building all the hatchets for all the lumberjacks to use. This guy would probably be pretty wealthy. He's probably one of the most important people in this whole town, but we've got a little watchtower over it as well for them to kind of scout. And then, well, we'll talk about that later, but we've got a little tower here as well. And so here we've got a tower that's kind of transporting the logs out of the river. So back in the day, there were people called log drivers. So they would send the logs that they cut down the river stream. Obviously, this patch of land wouldn't be here because it's kind of messing up our river here. But basically, they would cut wood from like that forest right there. They'd send the logs down the river, and then the people would stand on top of the logs and kind of drive the logs down the river. And that way, you know, it's an easy way to transport the log. So this is our representation of like a floating log. I was gonna add like a lot more, but I wasn't really sure that I liked how it looked, so I ended up not doing any more. But they kind of send the logs here. They process the logs into planks and whatnot, and then they would kind of transport it out into the world and sell it to other, you know, cities and countries. Then we built a simple bridge here to connect to our fairy forest area. And when you're cutting down all these trees, you get some angry ents. So we built some organics here. We built some organic monsters, which are our ents. And so lore-wise, my ents are actually fairies. So the fairies are called the Entios in this world. And so these ents are just kind of mech suits for the Entios or the fairies. I thought it was a little cool little way to add some lore And so fairies are very tiny. They're probably the size of this like flower, for example, probably half the size of this flower. So one way for them to fight is to become larger and, inhabit the spirits of an Ent and become an Ent. So we've got these cool little Ents here. This one is a birch Ent. I wanted to make them all look pretty different. So Ents, birch in general is like, they're typically pretty like long and lanky. So I wanted to make this Ent, the birch Ent, a little kind of like, hunchback. And then he's like shooting this little magic attack at this cart that's kind of bringing some logs back to the city. And then here we've got the oak Ent. When you think of oak, you think sturdy oak. So I wanted to make it a very sturdy oak Ent. And so it's got these little feet, and then it's got a boulder that it's gonna chuck at the poor little Timberfall town. I actually had a video kind of making Ents for every single tree type. So if you want to check that out, do check that out. I don't think the video did too well, to be honest, but it was a fun way for me to kind of like practice organics and like monsters, because I've never really built monsters before. They are kind of inspired by Treza from Hermitcraft as well. Next up on the list is the Dwarven city of Ashgrund. This is probably what most of my viewers know me for right now. This is the Dwarven kingdom that I've been building, and it is looking mad behemoth. Like, we've got this massive walkway for you to walk into the city, and then you're greeted by this stone face of the dwarf with a massive door, and then you've got two Dwarven statues who are holding some weapons. So this one's holding like a maul, and then this one is holding a battle axe, which it's kind of hard to show the sharpness of a battle axe. So yeah, we just did this. But the dwarves themselves look pretty cool. We've got these little blazing eyes to kind of, add some light to the area. And then we've got these like helmets that look very different for each one. So the dwarves are inspired by like Vikings, Norse mythology, and they're supposed to be kind of like a diesel punk, steampunk style city. So when you come inside, you're greeted with the Dwarven Hall. It's not the most extensive hall, but we've got a portcullis here for them to close down on when the city is, at nighttime, or they're closing off the city. So this would be guarded by a bunch of dwarves kind of in this front here. But on the walls here, we have 4 different faces, which is supposed to represent the 4 Dwarven kings of the past. There probably would be more Dwarven kings, but these probably are the most famous 4. But who knows? Maybe they ruled for like 60, 80 years each. And, this Dwarven kingdom would be very old in that case, even if there was only 4 kings. So we come inside and we have a little gatehouse right here that's controlling the portcullis here. So there's a little wheel. There'd be a Dwarven guy in there. And then bam, this beautiful build we built very, very recently. This is our waterfall, our glass waterfall. And then we have a little magical tree, the one and only tree for this area in general. But this is my very first terraforming project, and I must say, I think I did a pretty dang good job with it. It does add a lot of ambience to the whole area. And so, like, we've got a glass waterfall. It's obviously inspired by the legend B-dubs, but it adds a lot of ambience because before this, I never really terraformed before, and I haven't really added like many terraforming projects to this world. So this was one nice way to add a nice cool little spot to this area. But once we enter the Dwarven city, we have this street here. So you come down the street and then you've got a bunch of Dwarven, houses. So one thing with the Dwarven houses is I did add roofs. Typically in a cave, you might not find roofs. So a lot of people can argue that this is not a Dwarven style. It is just simple medieval. And with that, I agree with you, but we are adding little mechanical parts. And, to make the city look nice, I do need to add some roofs sometimes. I also got comments talking about building mostly with stone in this area, and which is another thing I agree with, but I tend to look at blocks without the block in mind. So, for example, I will use, I think I use a lot of gray wool, for example. I use gray wool to kind of transition from the deep slate. And, you know, wool in a build makes no sense. But for me, like, this is a kind of an art project, basically. This whole world is my art project. And sometimes to get the proper color, you need to use blocks that don't really work with the build. It's a style that I recently changed. It's a mindset that I recently changed to. Before, I used to just build with, you know, just stone and wood and stuff like that, because that makes the most sense. But then there are blocks that match really well, like dead coral blocks, or a really nice stone color. And, you know, a lot of creators use those blocks as well. So I don't want to, you know, limit myself in that sense. So we do kind of have all these random blocks occasionally. And so we're not going to only use stone, even though these are the dwarves. But we've got nice little shopping areas and little dwarven homes up top. So I do interiors for most of these at the moment. So this one is like a post office. And then the upstairs is empty because I did not do that. But this one is a bookstore where you come in, read some books. And then we've got a little market square here for the dwarves to kind of shop at and, you know, get some goods. This right here is our 4,000 subscriber monument, which is a little fountain that houses a little anvil, a little copper anvil. And so, yeah, so this is 4,000 subscribers on January 2nd of 2025. So thank you to all the subscribers for subscribing. This right here was the starter base for our dwarven area, and it's looking pretty snazzy. It's got 3 floors, actually. I call this a dwarven apartment. So most of my time was spent down here. Did do another interior as well. Very nice of me. But upstairs, we've got nothing. So we've got a second dwarven apartment up here, and then a third one here. And then we also did add a basement that's not inhabited either. But you can come to the side and you can go down these stairs to enter the basement. And so another main goal of the series is to add a lot of immersion to this area. So I do want to add all these little spots where you can actually go into, and then you'll come into a shop. Come up here, and then you've got, you know, stairway leading upstairs to the living quarters. You know, small little details like that can add a lot to, you know, your world. Like if you come in here, we've got a little meat shop right here. That's not housing the most meat right now, but it's got some sitting there. I do want to add a lot of villagers scattered around the area as well to make this area a lot more lived in. I don't know, this place to me looks super sick. We've got small little details scattered throughout the build to add a little more life in the area. And then here is another terraforming project. I added a little hot spring to explain where the dwarves kind of bathe and shower. Obviously with dwarves, they'd probably rely heavily on geothermal energy. So we've got this hot spring here. So relies a lot on geothermal energy for hot springs. And then our iron farm is connected to our hot springs here. So we've got like hot spring pools right here, and then we've got another hot spring pool here, which is where our iron golems end up dying. So we've got a little iron farm right there. And the iron farm is connected to this little factory right there. But that was the back of the iron factory. This is the front of the iron factory. So we've got the iron foundry here, which houses our iron farm. You can see their villagers scrambling right now because there's the zombies in there. But this is an iron factory here where I have my iron farm kind of spitting out iron. I did add an interior here as well. So we've got like a little lava pit right here for our lava collection. Got a little closet there, and then we've got a little workstation here where the iron is, I don't know, coming and getting processed. Got big forges that I had to block off with these. I had to block these off, but I was breeding villagers in here and they kept walking into the flames, which is why I had to add these little stops right there. So this is the main street, but eventually down the line, I want to add a lot more buildings across this main street right here. Right now, the only building is the iron foundry on the main street. And then cutting off into the street, we've got a side road, which leads to the guild hall, which is looking very cool, I must say. I added this nice cool effect where whenever the sun shines through this hole, it kind of brings a sunbeam down this direction. So one of the build techniques I like to do with this one is I like to add vegetation to where the sun would kind of hit. So the sun would hit here and here, but then darker spots where you'll have shadows. So this tower is probably blocking the sun. You'll have darker blocks. So you have black stone right here, as opposed to the spot that has more sunlight would have the deep slate. it's a pretty cool building technique that you can incorporate into your builds. It's kind of baking in the light itself. But going inside to the guild hall, so this guild hall is called the Bearded Dragons Guild and houses a bunch of dwarves. My doors are a little funky right now. We come in and we did another interior. So we've got our mending villager in here, and then inside we've got a nice like extravagant guild hall. So we've got a bunch of tables for the guild members to sit at. Got a little reading book area enchantment setup over here, and then a job board for all the guild members to kind of, you know, gather renown. That one gets you a lot of renown, so do that one. Subscribe. We've got a little bar in here as well where we'll put another villager. I do need to add a lot of villagers to this world still, but I have not yet done. But this is like a little chef's area back there, and you know, supplying all the dwarven mead and dwarven vodka and dwarven glowberry wine. That's one build that I want to do in the future. I want to do a glowberry vineyard. But here we got a little den and a little moose head right there. And then this area is also housing our dragon egg, which is not the most extravagant spot for our dragon egg, but you know, it's gonna suffice for now. This whole build is not done yet though. I do want to build like a women's quarter here and a men's quarter over there. This guild hall is supposed to be the hall for my channel members and my Patreons. I do need to add 1 or 2 names to this area and villagers to this area, but I have yet to do that. So, but thank you to my patrons for supporting me. If you do want to become a patron, you can join the channel membership at the bottom on YouTube, or you can do a membership on Patreon, and then you'll be able to get the world download for this area. One of the last few builds of this area is our little diggy hole spot. This is our Dwarven Quarry. So the Dwarven Quarry went a pretty diesel punk-esque. So we've got this diesel punk tower, or this diesel punk crane rather, that's got a lot of copper in it and a lot of like basalt and stuff. That's one way you can add like the diesel punk aesthetic. And then we do have this diesel punk elevator as well. I was lacking a lot of honeycomb, so I would come back and honeycomb a lot of this and turn it to like weathered copper instead to add a little more, you know, diversity, because right now it's just all oxidized copper. It didn't look like that originally. But over here we've got some scaffolding on the sides for them to do their quarrying, and then we've got a little quarry house right here where the dwarves that work here would come and kind of rest, get a break, get some ale in here that's nothing, eat their lunch here, you know, grab a smoke, whatever they do. But here is our Dwarven Quarry, and this would be an old Dwarven mine entrance that how they used to do it back like before they had all the technology. So this is my stone storage spot, so I keep all of my stone in here. I've been pretty bad with the inventory management though, so I do need to come back and drop off a ton of my stone that I've been accumulating within the Dwarven city. But again, we added small little details like these little mining carts for little mining wagons. And then we've got like, you know, these little scaffoldings on the walls. Super immersive, I must say. But with the diesel punk vibe as well, we added little diesel punk machines like mechs for the dwarves. So this is a mining mech for the dwarf to go into, and then they've got a little drill, the dripstone. I wish the dripstone could kind of go this way, like horizontally, but unfortunately this is what we're working with. But going down, we've got these little but our elevator shaft actually does work. I still need to come back and add the soul sand, but you know, it's fine. But over here we've got iron level, and then this is a deep slate where I go mine for deep slate. This one I do believe is my trading area, so let me come down this way. Bam. We come down, and then you've got a little mining area. So instead of going down there, we've got this area. This level is our iron level. So this is an iron farm, or not an iron farm. This is an iron mine where you can come down here and mine for iron. So we got little loads of iron, and then we got a little track here to go down here and mine for some iron. But here is our little dwarven mines. So coming over here, we've got a little trading hall. So it's a very cute little house built on the side of the wall here. It's kind of hanging off a little cliff. But so this is our Dwarven trading hall, where we trade our stonemasons. I haven't really upgraded their trades yet. They're all apprentices still, basically. I've been having the issue of lacking emerald, so but eventually down the line I want to fill this spot up with a bunch of villagers so I can trade with them, and that way I don't have to go to the mesa to get all my terracotta. I can just have a bunch of mesa, like some terracotta. I think the final trade is terracotta, so a very, very good trade. Over here, the small building, we've got a little breeding section for the rest of the dwarves. Yeah, so this is our Dwarven mine area. Very, very nice little spot to kind of come here, kind of get lost into mining. Oop, almost fell off. It's very raggedy and jankety though, so we've got a bunch of these little stilts kind of hanging around for a bunch of like the mining carts to go around. I did want to come back here eventually and add like a lot more carts kind of just zooming around. Needs a little more redstone, but I don't have much redstone, so that's why we didn't do it. But this is another one of those spots where I try to explore different build styles. So like these diesel punk style machinery was super fun to come up with, but you know, it worked out super nice, I must say. And last but not least is our Dwarven yurts. Our wool farm is right here. We've got a little Dwarven little village here, a small tiny little homestead spot where the dwarves are having little Mongolian yurts, and these little Mongolian yurts house our wool farm. So we've got 3 different yurts, and so this one has all of the monochrome colors. So we've got light gray, gray, black, and white wool coming out of this one. But we've got all of our sheep right here getting sheared, and then here we've got another one. This one's got all the blues and the pinks. But the wool on the outside is how we find out what wool color is in each yurt. And these yurts are super customizable. You can add all these different wood types to them, and then you can obviously add different color wool and stuff like this for the actual tent itself. But then you can add these little bits of wool up top to add a little pop of color to them. But this is one of the areas where the dwarves are kind of getting their food. So with such a large dwarven city, they need a lot of food. So this is one of the many spots that will be supplying food to the dwarven city. I do want to build a bunch of farmland throughout this whole area in the future. We got a little cozy cooking spot right here as well for them to eat. And then this spot is loaded in with a chunk loader. And so these dwarves are a very different culture from the dwarven city from Ashgrund. That one is very Nordic, very Viking-esque, and this one is more, you know, Mongolian. So these people are a little more people of the mountains, the steppe, like they live above ground instead of underground. And I like to do that because I think it makes sense that, you know, not all dwarves are monolithic. You know, I mentioned in my last episode, but dwarves are not monolithic. Elves should not be monolithic. They've got different cultures within, you know, different subsets of culture within each race. So you will have like dark elves, for example, and, you know, sun elves, things like that they talk about. You'll have hill dwarves and underground dwarves and whatnot. But that's all the time we have for the world tour. It's going to be a pretty extensive video, you know, looking at all the builds, but I hope you enjoyed looking at all the different builds that we've built in this area. I do want to explore a bunch more build styles in the future. Specifically, my next episode is actually Orcish architecture, so stay tuned if you want to see some Orcish architecture. But if you did enjoy the video, do leave a like and maybe join the Discord as well, and we can talk about world building together. And then if you really liked me, consider subscribing and becoming a Patreon member or a channel member. Anyway, that's all for this video. Bye-bye for now.